once you start that round two and you see that you can do it, you feel that almost confidence and that empowerment that you're like, what else can I do?
This is who I am now. I get to live this life because I deserve all of these things.
So you can do it in a strategic way rather than, cause that chaos in your life. So it is possible with small little action steps if you really want to try it. You don't want to regret that voice in your head or that, feeling on your heart that you should try something and then just keep suppressing it and then wonder years from now what would have happened.
I think right now would be a perfect time to share that this podcast is officially sponsored. And this week's episode is brought to you by Juliana Barbati Consulting. Juliana is an expert in podcast SEO. She's worked with so many different podcasts and helped shows grow, helped shows get more eyes, helped shows get more ears, helped shows, get more followers. And I am honored to be working with her and have her team backing the podcast. So I'm very excited that they are the first advertiser to join the Round 2 podcast, first of many. So thank you, Juliana. And if you are looking for any sort of services to help your podcast grow, feel free to reach out to her. Her contact information is in the show notes. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Round 2 podcast. I am your host, Nikki Corbett, and I am very excited to welcome Shannon Russell to the show. How are you?
I'm good, Nikki. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. It seems like we have some similar things going on with your second act. Yes. And this podcast being called Round 2. So I feel like you are just the perfect guest for us to talk about not only your story, but also to talk about what this Round 2 and second act means to the both of us.
I love it. Yeah. So in sync. I love it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's so neat. So where did second act come from for you?
Well, when I left my career in television after 16 years and I was trying to figure out what else to do, I had the idea of starting a second act is what I was calling it. And then when I started my business and my podcast, it was kind of like a play on television and the entertainment industry and the second act of it all.
Yeah.
It just kind of spiraled from there.
Okay, that's really neat. I mean, it's funny because, my idea for Round 2, it came when I was going through a divorce and I was like, oh, it's the Round 2, what's next, And then it got me thinking about all these other people who have had what I call Round 2 moments where, life has just thrown them a curveball that sometimes is intentional, sometimes is unintentional, sometimes unexpected and really sad, sometimes really joyful and positive, but it's always something that was never expected or never kind of on their personal roadmap, if you will. And so telling those stories has been so wonderful to do because there are so many people out there who make these massive life changes or who are forced to make massive life changes. And I think sharing what people learn and what they were going through is so important.
And it gives people, I think, who hear our stories and the stories that we share permission to maybe step out of their comfort zone and start that, what they want to do or what they've always had in the back of their heads.
Yeah, I think it's so true. And especially in the current environment where it's so common to be like, oh, this is my 9 to 5, but I also am a writer or I also am a podcaster or I also make these really cool things and I sell them on Etsy or whatever it may be. It's so normal for people to have all of these interests that, are also ideally making the money.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I just wrote a blog actually this morning about with all of the layoffs that this is the perfect time for everyone to create a business or some kind of a side hustle to just take back a little bit of that control because without that, there's really no stability in the workforce anymore. So it's just could be smart for everyone to just figure out what else they can do on the side and see how they can grow it.
Mm-hmm. And so for you, coming from movies and TV and that side of the thing, I love that you called it second act because it's just so fitting, right? So what has your second act look like?
Yeah, when I decided to leave TV, I was really just flailing, trying to figure it out. I had no one to coach me or help me. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to produce my own life, I said, and I'm going to start figuring it out. And I decided to open a franchise business. So that was my first step in my second act or my round 2. And I opened a franchise business and realized that my skills did transfer. I didn't think anything from television would transfer anywhere, but I was able to take an idea for a business and grow it just like I did an idea for a television show and bring it to the screen. So yeah, I ran that franchise business for 8 years. I sold it successfully last year. And that really showed me like a glimpse into entrepreneurship and what else I could do that was more flexible for my family.
Oh my gosh, that's really cool. So let's take a few steps backwards though, because what I really love about having a podcast is being able to tell people's stories, right? Because hearing, maybe similar backgrounds in business or whatnot, that's always enjoyable. But I also love those moments where it's like, oh, wow, like I experienced that too. Or I also like had that experience as a kid or as a kid in college or whatever it may be. So tell me a little bit more about yourself. Like, where are you originally from?
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey.
Okay.
So I grew up here. I was the first in my family to go to college because I just wanted to be in Hollywood. That was just my dream since I was a little girl. And I just figured that was the best way to get there is go study theater and communications and film. So yeah, I was the first to go to college. I went to school in North Carolina, and then I ended up getting an internship at MTV in New York City. And then that was my first job out of school. And I ended up pretty much working for them most of my career on and off for 16 plus years on both coasts. So yeah, it was great. But I started off in Manhattan and then went to LA.
Okay, I'm laughing because when you said Hollywood, so years ago, I lived in LA after college and I was there for about 4 years. And then I moved up to Northern California and I would go back a lot at first because I was having major regret of moving out of there, but ultimately ended up being the best decision. But I do remember one time I was in town visiting and I was staying with some friends and they had 2 boys. And at the time, I think they were probably like, I don't know, maybe 5 and 7 or something like that. I could be off by a couple of years, but still young where they weren't, driving or anything. And I was getting ready and the younger one came in and he said, "What are you doing? Where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm getting ready because I'm going to meet up with a friend for dinner." And he said, "Where?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to go to Hollywood." And he said, "Take me to Hollywood. I'm hilarious." And it was like the cutest thing ever. And it's just like stuck in my head. So whenever somebody says Hollywood, I'm always think of that. And it was just such a funny moment.
Yeah. No, I think that's what we think when we're kids, right? It's just this big glamorous place, but then you get there and you're like, no, it's just another city and you have to work hard and you have, and it's not as glamorous. Yeah.
Well, and there's like so much innovation, so much creativity, but it's also so incredibly cutthroat. I mean, I'm sure living there, it's like, any restaurant you go to, any coffee shop you go to, everybody that's working there is also an actor, a writer, a producer, all of the different things.
Yeah. And I feel like you have to always be on in a sense, right? Because you're always meeting people and that's how you get your next gig and your next job. And when I married my husband, I was like, I'm not changing my last name for so many reasons. But my main reason was because everyone knows me as Russell, and this is how I get my work. So it really is a relationship kind of town, I think.
Yeah.
But cutthroat nonetheless, for sure.
Well, it is funny too, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is that it's like some of these places that are so big, right? Like LA is huge, New York is huge, and even like the Napa Valley for wine country, right? It's small, but it's huge, right? There's so much. It's such a massive world destination for people that want to drink wine. But at the end of the day, it's like a very small, close-knit community in so many of those places. And you have to know people or the right people, or like that's how you get your ins and your jobs. So I totally understand why you were like, I'm not giving this up. I want people to be able to find me.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, cool. So, okay. So you grew up in New Jersey. You ended up in MTV world. So what decade is this? So I can relate.
This was 2000. So this was when like the height of TRL. Like, it was when they played music videos, like craziness in the studio and in, Times Square proper. So it was like the good time of music. And I've been such a music fan forever. So I was the girl who was at a different show every weekend. And so, working there, landing there was the perfect place for me.
Oh my gosh. I bet it was such a coveted job too.
It was. But all of us were so close because it was before production companies. It was like when you worked in TV, you worked for the studio. So we worked for MTV and we were all right out of college, going out 7 nights a week. And all to this day, our group of friends is still so close and all in touch. And I'm going to a reunion in a couple of weeks in the city. And so it's just, because we were all together, and then slowly outside production companies started popping up everywhere. Everyone had a production company, and then they were pitching shows to big studios, and it started spreading. But yeah, it was just like such a magical time that we'll never get back, sadly. The
I know,
industry
isn't
has
it?
changed.
Well, and it's so crazy too, because so many things change because of social media, right?
Yeah.
Like a show like TRL, it was like people were like racing to turn it on when it started.
Yeah.
And now, or I mean, I remember when I lived in LA, it was like Us Weekly, like every Friday, my Us Weekly magazine would be in the mailbox. And I was like, ooh, what's everybody up to? You know?
Yes. It's such a different world. And now everything's
Mhm.
just at our fingertips, and it's not as exciting. There's
Yeah.
not that like water cooler moment to chat with people about, or like, did you see who showed up on TRL today, or who was
Yeah.
number one on the countdown? Like, it
Oh
was
my
just
God,
such a
the
different
countdown.
time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I
That
know.
is so exciting and so neat. Okay, so when you decided to move on and then you mentioned getting into franchising, what type of franchise was it?
Well, I had a 3-year-old and a newborn at home. My whole goal, my whole reason for leaving this dream career that I loved was just to be more present with them. So I was
Okay.
traveling and the hours were so long, and I was like a 90-minute commute from Manhattan, and it was just too much. So when I had my baby, I was like, okay, I have to find something where I can be flexible and be present with them. And so looking for a business, I wanted something that would really fit. And I found a franchise that taught STEM education to kids.
Oh,
So it was Lego building and robotics and thinking like an engineer for children. So I was able to build this business with my boys in tow and going into schools and libraries and rec centers and teaching and really just growing the business with them. So it fit what I wanted at the time. And I was able to give back to other children and meet other moms. And
yeah.
so, yeah, it fit perfectly. And then soon after, other people started asking me, well, how did you go from that to this? Such a
Mhm.
change.
Huge
And then,
change.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because they would think I was a teacher because I was teaching the classes in the very beginning. And I'd say, actually, I'm a television producer. And they'd be like,
Yeah.
what? So it sparked that idea of like getting into coaching and trying to help other women from there. But yeah, it was the best. I call franchising like a business in a box in a sense, because for someone who didn't know business, right? I had always worked for other people. I was going in and I had the support of the corporate office and the other franchisees in my organization to lean on. And I had like the marketing materials already and the curriculum we were teaching. It was all ready for me, and it gave me kind of the wings to fly and grow the business.
Uh-huh. Interesting. That is such a huge shift, but it's also such a cool thing because you were able to do something totally different that you were also still like interested in.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
did you have a background of being interested in engineering or that type of learning?
Not at all. But so there was like a year in between TV and the franchise business where I was just figuring it out. And I took a 9 to 5 job locally. I was trying to do all the things that I felt like society needed me to do to be that responsible, person in the family. And I did go to get my master's in education because I thought, well, I'll take this course online. I'll get my master's because being a teacher is responsible and it's stable, even though I had zero desire to be a teacher. So I always say, as I was for a couple of years there, paying off the loans for this master's, I was like, you know what? This led me to opening a business in education because I knew I didn't want to be in the classroom. But when I was
Yeah.
thinking about like getting into entrepreneurship, it just fit well. And I was like in this world of kids with my 2 boys or my 3-year-old at the time was building all the time. And we
Yeah.
loved putting things together. And I love seeing that imagination. So for me, that was the correlation. But no, I
Uh-huh.
never thought I would get into education.
So here's a question for you. So as a mom, did you ever, because I feel like moms can go one of two ways, where there are some that are like, I'm a career woman. I've always had a job. I want to have a job. Like I couldn't imagine being at home all day. Some people even go so far to try it for a little bit. And then they're like, nope, this is not for me. And then there are some women who are like, I'm meant to do this. Like I want to be on the floor all day, playing with toys and running in the grass and doing all of that. So where in that camp do you fall, or where in that kind of spectrum do you fall?
I tried it and realized very, very quickly that I needed to have that creative outlet of work because for so many years I was collaborating on teams and I was creative and I was hustle and bustle and talking to a million people. And so I found it being very isolating and very lonely. And I did have postpartum depression with my first son, which is why we moved from the West Coast back to the East Coast to be closer to family. So I was really struggling, I think, to have kids in my mid to late 30s and say, like, whoa, I used to go out 7 nights a week and now all of a sudden this is my new normal. And it was really shocking. And so, yeah, I felt like I needed something outside and away from them to be my identity. And not my identity, but, like to really be creative and have me find myself in something other than them. But I did try it for a little bit and I just knew I needed to have something else.
It's interesting because I feel like that's totally okay, and I feel like, and I don't know, I'm not a mom, but I will say from, different things that I've read about, different friends that I've had who have gone through motherhood and having babies, deciding, should I go back to work? Should I not go back to work? Do I want to go back to work? Can we afford for me not to go back to work? Like all of these different decisions that you have to end up making. But then there's a societal pressure on top of things as well. So like, did you feel, because you did mention about like, oh, this would be a good thing to do or the right thing to do. Did you feel that pressure?
Very much so, because we went from, my husband's a producer as well. So we went from two people in really creative hustle and bustle jobs, making really good money, to me all of a sudden saying, I don't want to do that anymore. And so I felt like we couldn't afford to just be one, or we weren't sure if we could afford to just be a one income household. And I think honestly, looking back, I didn't want to have to go back to television. Even though I loved it, I just didn't want to be traveling and the hours and the stress and the pressure. And so I wanted to do anything else that I could to make this work. And so I, after however many months, went and got this 9-to-5 job. Yeah. It was toxic. It was awful. I did not last. I had to get out of there. And then I was doing this, master's program. So yeah, there were so many societal pressures. Yeah. Probably pressures that I put on myself more than anything, because I did have this career where I was this person in this high regard and in charge of so much every day, to all of a sudden, like, what now? It was such an adjustment that so many people go through. But I think you do have to have that messy middle where you're figuring it out yourself before you can figure out where you land. I knew I'm a very self-aware person, so I knew that 9-to-5 was not going to cut it. The master's really, after a while, I was like, this is not real. And I just started really turning inward and saying, what do I want to do? But it was a lot of soul searching and work completely alone in a silo to figure that out. Yeah. Not a fun time.
But look at where you got, though. I mean, that's what I think is like so beautiful about, like you said, that messy middle is taking a really hard look. And was depression ever something that you dealt with outside of postpartum?
No.
And so how did you manage getting through that? I mean, that sounds like a huge hurdle.
Yeah. You know what it was? And because you know LA, is that I felt like as soon as the baby was born, everyone disappeared, all of our friends. They didn't have kids yet. And so I felt like everyone was just still out every night and they didn't understand. And so I was really alone and it was just a lot. And within 6 months, we moved back closer to my family. So I feel like it was a really abrupt decision to make. And I probably wouldn't advise somebody to make that when you're feeling depressed. But no, I think when we moved back to the East Coast and we had more support, and then I just went back to working in Manhattan, so got back into a routine and things were okay. But I was very scared with my second son. I was like, I need to be prepared so this doesn't happen again. And luckily it didn't. But yeah, so I did not understand what was going on. It was,
that's going to be so tough because it's like, not only are you dealing with this like huge new adjustment of taking care of this tiny little human being that you created and that you love so much, but that can't tell you like, hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I'm tired. Or like, I really just need to poop. You know what I mean? And then you're feeling all sorts of ways after your body's gone through so much. And then you start feeling, down and sad and, negative or angry or whatever, however depression like rears its head. Gosh, look at you. Tough.
Yeah, it was tough. And I just think, you search for what is going to make that go away. And for me, it was my parents. I just needed to be by my mom and dad. And that just helped and changed everything to make it okay and make it better. And then, to try to figure out how am I going to make this all work? So lots of learning in that time where I feel like now at least I have that experience and I'm grateful for it to be able to maybe help others,
Totally.
whether it's friends who have kids or clients, to just say like, okay, this could happen and here's what to do, or here's how to not put so much pressure on yourself in these
Yeah.
life transition kind of situations.
I know. I think that that's such a huge point and such a big thing that people don't often actively recognize, is that the pressure and the expectations that can seem societal and can seem outward are often like just compounded by our own thoughts and fears and demons coming up. And then we think like, oh my gosh, everyone's probably thinking X, Y, or Z about me, when in reality, they're literally not thinking about us at all.
No, exactly. It takes so long to get to that point though, right? No
Mm-hmm.
matter if it's a divorce, if it's a career change, birth of a baby, whatever it is, like you just feel like the world is centering around you and what your next steps are.
Yeah, I know. It is so crazy. And I mean, I literally remind myself constantly, whether it's like recording a podcast or writing a newsletter or making a reel or whatever it may be, I literally will just have a little like mantra going in the back of my head that's like, no one cares, no one cares, no one cares, you know?
I have to steal that because it's
Totally.
so true.
It's so true. And then when you also go one level more, it's like if you think about all the people that you love that are putting out content or sharing their day or releasing podcasts, writing books, doing all these things, and like you're obsessed with it. You're like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's like, well, she's just a normal girl too. She's just a career gal or a mom or both or a world traveler or, you know, any of the above, right? Ooh. I almost dropped my microphone because I'm getting so passionate.
You're so excited. No, you're so right though. It really is. That's such a great mantra. And just to realize like we're all just trying to be the best versions of ourselves, whatever that looks like. And it's like a windy road every day. It's never the same. So yeah, it's giving ourselves that grace, I think, to just realize we're doing the best we can.
You are. And I feel like too, like tell me if you've experienced this, but I feel like the older I get and the more people that I speak with and the more of these types of conversations that I have, whether it's on a podcast or if it's just in general, like meeting somebody through networking, is that like everybody's still just trying to figure it out.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's that whole fake it till you make it in a sense, but you're just a real person. It doesn't matter, how many followers you have or however many podcasts you've had out. You're just trying to figure it out and share your message and connect with people. And I think we're really fortunate as podcasters to be able to have these conversations because it keeps it real. Whereas other people who maybe don't see that on a daily basis like you and I do. So we're really lucky to get to have these like really honest conversations with real people.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk more about the concept of like round 2 and of second act. It's funny. One of my comfort shows is Sex and the City, and like rewatching that. And God knows how many times I've rewatched it, but sometimes I'll just put it on in the background while I'm doing, work that doesn't require a ton of brain power. And it's always interesting to me, like as the more I watch it and as I get older and the things I recognize about their friendships and about like how they interact with one another and about like all the different life changes that they experience as they continued on. And in one episode that I saw recently, it was, Charlotte was talking about having a great love. And she told Carrie, like she said, I think we all get 2 great loves in our life, and made this huge blanket, like grandiose statement. And then she says to Carrie, like, oh, well, yours were big and Aiden. And Carrie's kind of like, okay, great. So like, I'm not with either of them. So what is that? What are you saying, that like, I'm all out of my great loves? And so it kind of made me think about the whole like round 2 as far as it applies to them, and how, just because maybe you've had that one big round 2 at some point in your life, or your one big second act, we continue having those as time goes on. And I mean, I have even gone so far to say like we have mini round 2s sometimes, and then we have these big monumental ones where you take a hard left and then you're like, whoa, where am I now?
Yes, I think that is so great. And I got chills when you were saying that, because it's all about, like I always say, check all the boxes in life, right? Like think about all of the things that you can do. And I don't know about you, but once you start that round 2 and you see that you can do it, you feel that almost confidence and that empowerment that you're like, what else can I do? Let me start this. Let me try this. And then you start living your life where you're not going to have those regrets at the end of the day, because you can just keep reinventing yourself or adding on something else. And I think that makes it really exciting. and it makes life an adventure rather than just this one path we take.
It definitely is. And giving yourself the freedom and the permission to say like, no, this is who I am now. And it doesn't matter that yesterday I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think that is such an empowering statement. Like I actually saw this TikTok the other night and this girl, she was saying like, yeah, I used to be like significantly overweight and I didn't feel like I was lovable and I didn't have a great job and I was barely able to pay my rent. And she was like, now like I've lost 60 pounds and I'm living in my dream city and I have a boyfriend who loves me. And she's like, oh, it's because like I changed my mindset. And she was like, oh, and this is who I am now. Like, this is who I am now. I get to live this life because like I deserve all of these things. And I was like, ooh, I love this like statement of like, this is who I am now and just moving forward. Like, okay, This is who I am today now.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is so great. So you talked about Sex in the City and I was obsessed with that, but also obsessed with 90210.
Oh my God, of course.
Yeah. And I write this little part in my book just because I'm like a fangirl of Jenny Garth and Kelly and all of them. But you remember that episode where she has to choose between Brandon and Dylan and she says, I choose me. And, you know, and now she has a podcast and merch and all this about it. But it's just that idea too of like you choosing yourself and what you want to do in this round 2 or second act, because you so often, especially as women, we put everyone else in front of us and we take care of everyone else. But to just say, it's okay for me to choose myself and my happiness, whatever that looks like, and move towards that.
Yeah.
And I really think that is another great lesson to take with us, that it's our lives, one person we're in charge of. So yeah. Choose yourself.
You have to, because I mean, we're only here one time.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's one of my thoughts that I, you know, remind myself of often. Like there's a line in a song by Jennifer Nettle. She was a part of the band Sugarland. And it says like, we only get this one trip. And I'm like, that's it. You know, it's like, so why would I not just choose myself and do all the things that I want to do? It's funny. Like this is and it turns into like this topic of like selfishness, right? Yes. I definitely have had this conversation on this podcast more than one time about selfishness. And like, I will go to my grave saying that I think being selfish is a good thing. And if you aren't selfish, like you're setting yourself up for disaster.
Thank you. I agree with that a lot. I do, because it's like selfish self-care. It's you just realizing that you are important. And like you said, we get one shot at this.
Yeah.
So don't put yourself second when it comes to your happiness and what you want to do. And this selfishness, I often think about when I did have my son and went through all of that I led a very selfish life up until that point because I was living it fully. And that's what I mean by selfish, is that, wow, I didn't have my child at 21. Like I lived all of those years of my 20s and half of my 30s, like living it up, having all of these stories and adventures to share and tell people. And that was selfish. And then all of a sudden you get this baby and it's a shock, you know? But it was like, but I was taking care of myself. I was living it up during that time. And it's okay for me to do this now on the other side, or you to do it now in round 2, like to just say like, no, I still have things I want to accomplish. Selfish or not, I'm accomplishing it. And this is what I'm going after. So absolutely. I love that you say that.
Well, thank you. But I also think too, like being selfish though, like for you at this phase, that can mean like being like a really good mom. And that can mean like prioritizing your boys in different ways than maybe somebody else does. And that can be your definition of selfishness. Like, no, we're going to do this because this is best for my boys, or I'm going to live this way and I'm going to choose this career because this is best for me and for my boys, you know? So I think it's just like reframing it and also like not using it as a negative.
Right.
Yeah.
No, and then that's beautiful. And it's just setting your priorities every day.
Definitely. So, okay, let's talk about your podcast, because you have a podcast too, Second Act. So what made you decide to jump into that world after all these other cool things?
Well, when I had my franchise, it was like those conversations of how did you go from that to this? And that sparked me starting my business, Second Act Success. And that I started the podcast right away. So that was actually before I even started coaching people, I started the podcast because I wanted to share success stories of people, especially women who had made that transition and found success. And I think at the time I was probably just I was craving that information and those stories myself, and just wanted to learn by example. And so, it started with me just interviewing other women who had gone from this to that and really sharing that. And then it kind of morphed into solo episodes. And now I do both. But I just think for listeners to hear that and say, if she can do it, I can do it.
Yes,
because like we said, she's just a normal person too. but she had that epiphany or that aha moment, and she decided to run with it instead of like suppressing it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the more you hear that, it makes it real. And that's what creates that catalyst for other people.
No, definitely. I mean, that's what I often say. It's funny. So the episode that I released last week, I've been saying more and more lately that as long as like one person finds value from each episode, like that, I feel like that was great, because that was like that person was meant to hear this person's story. And I got this email from this girl that just gave me chills. She was like, this was such a great episode. She was like, I experienced trauma at a young age, and hearing this story just really, really like helped with my healing process. And I was like, what? Like, wow. I had chills. I was like jaw on the floor. So I, of course, screenshot it and like sent it to my guests. And I was like, we talked about this, like, wow. You know, and it's just like so amazing. So it's like, yeah, like I love sharing these stories. And my original tagline for round 2 was like real stories, real people. Because another thing too that I thought about when I came up with the idea was how, you know, and again, before podcasting, right? Like when it was like, you know, Dateline or 60 Minutes or 2020 or whatever, all those news magazine shows where it was like, you know, you're hearing these stories, but they're stories from like a celebrity or an athlete or somebody. And their pendulum swung so far, you know, from one direction to the other. Cause like maybe they were, you know, 6 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment, or, you know, grew up like without all of these different things. And now they're this super famous athlete or celebrity. And it's like, okay, that doesn't happen to everybody though. Right. But what does happen is like beautiful change and beautiful growth. And so telling these stories, I felt was so important.
Because they're tangible, right? Like,
exactly.
Like, wow, they're doable. Yes. You know, and here's how you can accomplish it. Those are the beautiful stories to share and makes all the difference. Like you said, just that one email just made your day, and probably your guest day too.
Totally. And I think about, you know, this conversation here with you. It's like, think about how many working moms there are, how many working moms have struggled with postpartum, have struggled with feeling like they had this pressure to continue working, or feeling guilty because they did try not working and then felt like, ooh, I want to go back to work, and struggling with all of those different things. And then, you know, a lot of people sometimes too, they don't always like believe that they can make a huge pivot career wise, or, oh, I've been doing this for so long. Like, how could I possibly go try something else? So I would totally imagine that people hear your story and are like, well, dang, if she can do that, so can I.
Yeah, they absolutely can. And I always say too, I did it with absolutely no help. I was in a silo, you know, and it was my parents and my friends and even my husband saying like, are you sure? Like, this is a drastic change, and having like an intervention with me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, no, I know I can do it. So it's like, now I just want to be that accountability partner for other people, because it's so easy to go back into your shell. And it's so easy just to listen to the outside voices and then not keep going. And I just want to be like, no, don't listen to other people. Research it. Just make sure you know where you're leaping, because you can do it in a strategic way rather than, you know, cause that chaos in your life. So it is possible with like small little action steps if you really want to try it. So
where do you think your self-confidence came from to just be able to say to everybody who was questioning why you were doing what you're doing, to just be like, no, I know I can do this?
I honestly don't know, Nikki. I feel like I've had people ask me that before. I think it's just my parents, and it's something from just growing up. I was always that like kid who was like, no, I'm going to Hollywood, you know, like I'm going to do this, and like no one can stop me. Very much the black sheep in the family. And, you know, my parents aren't like that. They got married at 18 and had the same job, you know, all the way through. But they were always so supportive and just saying, sure, whatever you want to do, Shan, you can do it. You can do it. And just being there as that support system. So yeah,
it just warms my heart so much when people talk about their parents. Like, I just think it's so sweet, because it's so nice. And I would imagine as parents, as you're going through the journey of parenthood, you kind of like wonder, am I doing things right? Am I making the right decisions? Am I guiding them? Am I teaching them? All these different things. Mm-hmm. And then to see your children as adults and, you know, being successful and doing all these things. But I think that some of these little clips, like, I love them. So I love when people talk about, so you'll know that this is going to be a clip, because I want your mom to hear it.
Yeah. They're my everything, and they're my kids' best friends. So I feel like I'm doing something right in that sense. Just having my really 2 boys be able to grow up with them and have their influence now go on to my children too. So
yeah. Oh, that's really, really cool. Well, it obviously was like the best decision for all of you to move back to be closer.
Yeah. And you don't know it at the time, but I think that just brings up another point of like, you don't know. So go with what your heart is telling you at the time. And it's fun to look back and just see how far you've come. And, and honestly, everything is changeable. So even if we came and it wasn't right, we could go back. You can change careers, start a business and say, this isn't for me and go back, but you'll never regret not trying. And I think that's the biggest thing to have your listeners take away, is that you don't want to regret that voice in your head or that, feeling on your heart that you should try something and then just keep suppressing it and then wonder years from now what would have happened.
No, that's such a great, I love that you said that, because I feel like there are so many people who feel like locationally stuck and feel like, oh, well, I bought this house here, so I can't leave. And it's like, no, you can sell your house, or you can rent your house, or you can, you can leave. Like, what is that saying? It says like you're not a tree, like you can get up and walk away or something like that. I need to find, maybe that'll be like a good episode title, but that's it's like so true, right? Yeah. Like you're not a tree.
No, not at all. Yeah. And if it's not now, it can be in a couple of years, but you can work towards that move, there's just, we should be moving a little bit every day in some direction that we want to go in.
Definitely. Even little things, just tick the little tiny things off your to-do list. That's what when I'm getting overwhelmed or feeling like I haven't done enough in one day, I'm like, well, wait, stop. What did you do? What did you actually do today? And then I'm like, oh, okay, that was pretty good.
Exactly.
All right, that wasn't so bad. Yeah. Okay. I can go for a walk. I can watch 30 minutes of Sex and the City.
Yes, you can.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've loved chatting with you, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up your book, because I know that it is about to come out or just is coming out, and I can't wait to read it. So tell everybody about it and where they can get a copy.
Yeah, it comes out May 7th. It's Start Your Second Act: How to Change Careers, Build a Business, and Create Your Best Life. So it's just, I'm hoping it's a tool for women who don't work with me, who can just get this and get everything that I teach in one place. Lots of examples of success stories and, some actionable steps to start taking action.
Yeah, this is absolutely brilliant, because I actually spoke the other day with a book editor. She has her own business where she helps people get their ideas and their story out of their mind and onto paper. And she was saying, like, one of those things is so important if you are someone who does coach people, or if you're someone who gets like hit up for advice on whatever your career is on a regular basis. She's like, write a book. Then you can just be like, here's my book. If you want to work further with me, like, here's my website. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it was another box that I wanted to check off. It was another thing I've always had in the back of my head. And honestly, I want to write fiction. So like, I think that'll be my next step, but this made sense for the business. And when I speak on stages and all of that, like, well, here's something else that you can keep learning from. And I'm super excited. It's been an incredible process, just getting, like you said, the ideas out of my head and onto the pages. So I'm really excited for it to be in the hands of others.
Cool. Yeah, that's so cool. I feel like you were like the dictionary definition of, I wanted to do something, so I did. I mean, you're so multifaceted. I love this.
Thank you. I'm trying. And I feel like that's what it's all about, right? Like, what else can we do? And then that's just inspiring others, hopefully. And at least for my kids, like, they're like, what are you doing now? Like, and I love that, because I want them to see, like, you can become a doctor, but I want you to have your own business too. Like, I want you to have something that's creative, that's your own, because that's what's the most stable these days, like, is whatever you create for yourself. So
yeah, 100%. Yeah. Amen to that. Well, cool. Well, how can people find you? What's the best way for them to get in touch?
They can go to startyoursecond.act.com. That has my book, free resources. And then of course, I'm Second Act Success on all social.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, thank you so much. This was so fun. I loved chatting with you. And everybody, thank you so much for being here. As always, please remember to like, share, subscribe, comment, all of the good things. I love hearing from you, and we will see you next week.